Let's see what happens when we add two stories together. See what arises for us. The first is the story of that monk who was in a monastery high up in the mountains of Tibet since his early youth, in fact. And during those years, he learned the Buddhist tenet that life is suffering. But growing in his perception, like a flame, was the thought that this suffering was caused by the evil, the exploitation, the greed in the world. And it grew like a flame inside of him until he could not bear it any longer. He went to the abbot of the monastery and he said, I cannot remain in this safe, beautiful, peaceful place while there is so much sadness, suffering, evil in the world. And the abbot, without a word, went over to the wall where there was an ancient sword. And he took down the sword and handed it to the young monk, together with a shining disc that appeared to be like a piece of metal, like an amulet, perhaps. Now the young monk immediately put the piece of metal in his robe pocket and completely forgot about it. But carrying the sword, he made his way down the mountain path until he came to the wooden gate that opened into the pathway leading to the monastery. Closing the gate behind him, he went out into the world, where for years, everywhere he went, that he perceived to be evil, which was mostly everywhere, he wielded his sword fearlessly. But it seemed that wherever he attempted to eradicate evil, evil arose again. So after many years, he was fatigued, worn out with these great efforts. And so he made his way back to the monastery again. But when he came to the gate of the monastery, the gate which led to the path up to the monastery, when he attempted to open that gate, it resisted his efforts to unlatch it. He banged on it, he shook it. He took out his sword and tried to break it open with his sword, but to no avail. The gate would not open before him. He could not even climb over. His attempts to do so were thwarted. But just as he'd worn out all his methods of attempting to enter, down the path came one of the monks, one who had been his companion those years ago, carrying the pitcher that enabled him to take water from the stream that passed by the gate. The monk came down and effortlessly opened the gate, to the great surprise of our now middle-aged monk. And they greeted one another. And of course, the monk who had wandered the world with his sword asked the other monk, "Why is it that I have been unable to enter the gate leading to our monastery?" And the other monk said, "My friend and companion, my brother, have you looked at the amulet that was given to you by our abbot?" And suddenly the wandering monk remembered and took the disc out of the pocket of his robe. When he looked at it, he realized it was a mirror, and he held up the mirror in front of himself and his companion. And to his great surprise and shock, beside him he saw the shining being, greatly illuminated, of his companion monk. But when he saw himself, he saw a ghoul with bloodied fangs, claws, a demonic being, and he fainted right away. His companion monk kneeled down beside him and sprinkled some of the water from the stream on his face to bring him back to consciousness, and raising him up, took him by the hand, led him through the wooden gate, up the path that led back to the monastery. And then there's a story you'll no doubt remember of that wandering fakir. Now we know that these fakirs are seekers after truth, who on their travels have gathered what can be called magical powers. Now our wandering fakir had gathered such powers, and this was in the way of a black bag that he carried around with him. But in his wandering, in his travels, he had seen so much greed, so much vice, so much evil. But he found that whenever he met what he perceived to be evil, he could pop it in his black bag and it would disappear. So he spent his days wandering the earth and placing in his black bag whatever he met that he perceived as being evil. Those greedy beings who took advantage of others, the priests and the gurus who exploited their flock, and so on, and so on, until finally all of the perceived evil had been popped into his black bag and disappeared, which left, of course, only the demons who caused all this evil floating around in the air. So his next task was to pop all the demons in his black bag. But the demons were a little bit feisty, and they kept inflating his bag so that it became so big he could hardly carry it around. So he decided to go to a blacksmith who could use his anvil to beat the bag back into shape. So he gave the blacksmith a few coins, and the blacksmith beat it with his anvil, and flattened the bag, but released all of the demons in the process, who flew down to hell. Well, of course, the fakir had pretty much done away with all the evil beings, and the demons had gone, so his job was pretty much finished. So, of course, what could he do? He left his body. But what happened was he went straight down to hell. And there the demons opened the door of hell with all the flames coming out and said, "Oh, it's you. You who sent us all down here. In you come for your punishment." But of course, by now we know how these things happen, and over the years of all that he'd been doing, which, could be perceived as doing good, really, that bag had become very powerful. So he popped all of hell in his bag and it just disappeared. So there was nowhere else for him to go except straight up to heaven. When he got to heaven's gate, there was St. Peter. St. Peter said, "Oh, it's you that had all of this evil in the world. No, we cannot have anyone in heaven just like you." "Well," said the fakir, "I did away with all the evil in the world. I did away with the demons, and now I've done away with hell, and there's nowhere else to go, so you have to let me in. And if you don't, I'll just pop in my black bag and you'll disappear." Peter said, "Quick, quick, open the gates." So, when we put these two stories together, from our own experiences of life, what do you perceive as the difference and or the similarity between them? What are the sacred symbols represent for us? The amulet that's a mirror, the gate that won't open. The results of perception. What have they led to for us? And how do they allow us to recognize similarity or the difference between these two tales? Don't you love that song? I think it's Tina Turner who sings, "What's love got to do with it?" Isn't that her song? Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it?
Well, they're both seeking out evil. They perceive evil, but they dealt with them in different ways. Whereas one was trying to destroy it, and the other one, sort of by putting it in his pocket, sort of embraced it.
Yes. So what's the difference between wielding the sword against evil and the black bag that one pops it into and it disappears?
One is a fight against something, and the other one is just a sword in it.
Right.
A resistance and an acceptance.
And what have we done in our life relative to this, to bring us to this point where we recognize when love is dead, all that remains is love.
Well, one, we're not worried about the evil.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
We're not concentrating on it or looking at it.
No, no, no.
Mm.
I think the key is in the amulet,
Yes.
in the mirror.
Uh-huh.
And I was just being amazed because just yesterday I got a copy of the lyrics to Michael Jackson's Now You're Singing Rock and Roll songs, aren't you? Michael
Let's
Jackson's
bring us into the modern
Man
day.
in the Mirror.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that song.
Mm.
It's a really amazing, powerful song, and yeah, it's quite a few of them, but I got the lyrics for some young girls in Kuranda because they know some of the song, and I thought, well, I'll get the lyrics so they can sing the whole thing. And I just did that yesterday, and it's in my bag right there, so anybody can have a look at it.
Right
And
on.
see how valid it is for your
Yes,
story,
Yes.
and which is really wonderful. But it's all about I'm looking at the man in the mirror and seeing what I have to change in me for all of that out there. And I think in that story, in the amulet, when he could look at himself and see the difference and the fainting, and then the bringing back to life with the that clear way of looking in the mirror at oneself and the world. Yeah, I think that was the key to the story.
And while, of course, the gate represents, while we're out there fighting, you know, like, we're going to do it, it's such a mind thing that we're never going to get through the gate.
No. No. That's right.
But then together